Hello.
Yes, mate. How you doing?
Good. I'm good. I remember this was getting recorded, and I remembered I'd squeezed a spot on the side of my face, and now I'm just like, fuck, what a stupid cunt. Have I done that?
That's
Fuck.
fine. I'll put out the low res promos. Don't worry about it. It'll be fine.
Yeah, if you can, or just fix it in post. Just put like a little star over it, and just don't never mention it.
Two hammers, maybe. Just a couple of little hammers over the nose there.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Should do the
That
trick.
that'd be perfect. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna close all my windows because I want to make sure that this stays good signal. Signal in my gaff is a little bit up and down. So if at any point it fucks up, just let me know, and I'll see what I could do.
Will do, mate. Whereabouts are you?
I'm in near Hackney Downs.
Okay, yeah, nice. I see you're
How about you?
repping the gun. I'm all the way out in Leon
Gotta
Sea,
do it.
actually.
Oh yeah. Oh well.
Yeah,
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 you're
yeah.
fucking miles away. Lovely part of the world.
Yeah, the gun. You just reminded me of an argument I had with a northern girlfriend way back now, in maybe like 15 years ago. Uh, gun and one rhymed, and it started outside that pub. And she swore blind, and it must have really meant a lot to me, that argument, because I've held on to that for 17 years or something like that now.
Yeah.
I
Well,
swore
I
blind.
mean,
Yeah, it rhymes, but I think it's because she was northern, and one to her was one.
but then how are you saying
I was
gun?
trying
You
to.
saying
I don't know actually saying gun. I can't remember. But anyway, she disagreed, and I was a little bit shocked. She was a writer for a prominent tabloid supplement, broadsheet supplement rather. And I
mm-hmm.
was like, how can you not know this rhymes? And obviously I'm not over it.
No, you clearly aren't.
Yeah.
And rightly so. You know, every man must take a stand, and you have taken you've chosen a very peculiar hill to die on, I would say.
Yeah. But we all need one, like you say, and that's mine.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for mine. But clearly not a man of principles because I've not died on the hill yet.
Mate, I really appreciate you sparing the time for this today. I know we've been trying to get it on for a bit. Um, so yeah, buzzing to get some time with you. You're someone that's kind of been, well, obviously on my radar for the work that you were putting out with Mundial for a solid amount of time, and then obviously going out on your own, and kind of quite admirable what you were doing. And I know, like, what the impression I get of you from your socials is that and just this first few minutes of talking to you, is that you are a very confident man with some edges. I'm gathering there's a kind of don't really give a fuck about you, which I think is great. As a creative, I think that's necessary. Um, yeah, I'm curious to unpick some of it and where it kind of, on having that authenticity that I'm interpreting, going out into, essentially being a gun for hire, and how that holding on to that authenticity in a world where you are kind of, almost, well, you're to no, but beholden to brands wanting to work with you. You've got this kind of I am me, and take that as you will
Yeah,
kind of way about you.
it's yeah. I mean, he's. I mean, my therapist would love to hear you say that I've got all this sort of stuff. But I think it's.
Well,
I
I'm
don't know. Do you
glad
want me
to
to
bring her
jump
out
in?
today. She's
Fuck! There you've been avoiding you. Yeah, try not to excavate it too much. Just because, like, you never want to lose the juice, do you? But no, do you want me to just jump in? Should I just start chatting
yeah,
about
mate.
stuff?
Yeah, go for it, mate. Yeah, the more informal and tangent based, the better, really.
Careful what you wish for. Yeah. I mean, you know, I think I'm like, look how articulate I am. What an articulate man. The work that I did with Mundial genuinely feels like another lifetime ago, but I think it was so central to my, frontal lobe coming in and just like really understanding who I am as not just as like a professional or creative or a man, but just kind of like how I see the world. And that's a very highfalutin way of saying I do believe that we are kind of just like the result of all of our experiences. And I think I spent a long time, pretty much my whole 20s, right, just not really feeling like I belonged and just sort of like being a bit in I don't know, like a defensive like crouch, like I was just like, fucking, let's go, let's go there. And everyone's coming at me. Because and this is fully getting therapy now, but I'm not going to invoice you. I, always kind of felt like an imposter. I was having this conversation this morning. I remember someone in 2014 calling me a desperate industry chancer. And I think at that time it was probably true. And clearly it's fucking rattled me for a decade, right? But it's, I'm not from an environment where people worked in creative industries. My dad's a cabbie and my mum doesn't work. And, neither of them went to university. And when I was in school, no one encouraged me to go to university, even though I got good grades and probably could have gone. And I was just like terrified of that. And I thought the only thing I can do is lie about my age, get an internship advice, and then just sort of like see where it goes, which is what I did. And it was just like, you know, being called a chancer, I think at that sort of point in my career, I was like maybe like 23, 24, pre-Mundial, that was true. I had no qualifications, no reason for being there, no sort of like defined voice or perspective or, way of seeing the world and my place in it, just on a grand scheme, not even just work-wise. And I was just like being a chancer and just kind of like taking some pride in that because I felt like an interloper. I felt like, this is not an industry where I belong, and there's not an industry where many people sounded like me and come from my background, to be frank. And I think that the crew that I ended up gravitating towards, first at Sabotage Times, which is where I met pretty much all of the Mundial team, and then through Mundial, I think we all just kind of like gravitating towards each other because we had a similar background and a similar sort of like way of moving through the world, for better or worse, and I really feel like that has been something that has ossified in my brain over the last couple of years post Mundial. I left I left 3 days before my 30th birthday, which felt a bit like a cry for help at the time. And really was just sort of like, you hear about like Indigenous peoples going on like a walkabout, right? Where they're just sort of
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
you get to a certain age and they're just like, right, off you go into the world and sort of find yourself. And that was just me just like entering into the freelance world, because I was like, I'd kind of only really known this relatively coddled, cloistered version of probably having relatively low agency and being a bit of a people pleaser. And I'm just sort of like, yeah, fuck it, let's just do whatever and just kind of, I'll follow you into battle, sir. And and then making the most of it while I was there. From then, started to get a real definition of the things that I liked and didn't like. Lots of stuff I did was great at Mundial, and I can look on now very proud of. Lots of things that I was like, wow, that was fucking crap. Like, why did I do it like that? And I was very lucky that came early in my career. So I also had a lot of runway after that. Touch wood that I don't get hit by a bus or something, because that'll be shit. I've really sort of like come out of the other side of it just feeling, and this is through a lot of therapy and through a lot of like positive reinforcement from the people who love me and also the people who pay my invoices on time. Just really finding a place for myself in the creative world and feeling like, I don't know, feeling like I finally belong, which is, a very high-minded way of saying, I can afford my rent in fucking East London and pay the and afford to have dinner, which is something that a lot of people can't do when they're trying to do stuff like this. So I'm very grateful and very lucky of where I found myself at. That's a fucking long way of answering what was a pretty. And you actually know what? It wasn't even a simple question. You essentially just asked me to get to the root of my id. You're just like, come on then, let's crack open your brain and show me what's inside it. So you get what you asked for.
Yeah, exactly. I think you definitely understood the brief by going in there. Going back to when you were talking about, so you're not from an area where people necessarily go into the creative field. Dad's a cabbie, mum doesn't work. I think we've got a lot of that in common. I think we're from similar parts. So I grew up in Dagenham. I think you Hornchurch, maybe.
Yeah,
Have I
so I
got
went
that
to school
right?
in Hornchurch and grew up in the East End. So when I was about that crucial point where I was like 11, 12, moved into Hornchurch, where everyone just wanted to fight me because I was from East London. And I was just like,
Yeah.
don't fight me, I'm fucking tiny. But like, all that sort of stuff is character building, right? My character got built into a very defensive person, which I've spent a long time and a lot of money trying to undo. Yeah, I
You
think
should
it's
invoice those kids from Hornchurch. That's where that invoice should be going, mate.
fuck 'em.
Yeah, they.
Fuck
Yeah,
those
I
kids. Quote
actually.
me. Yeah.
Brief tangent. I don't know if you remember this, probably not, because it's quite a while ago. But I made a book, and I think I put one through your door, a West Ham
Oh,
book.
yes, I do. Farewell to
It was like
Berlin, right?
There's like no place like home. There was another one called Farewell to Berlin, which was done in
Well, I
conjunction with
fucked
the
that
club.
up. Yes.
I don't think I've got mine in here, but yeah, it was just like
I
a
definitely,
claret and yellow
I
cover.
remember having that in the office 100%. In the 10 times I've moved, occasionally I just needed something to just throw into the bin to just keep my eye in. And it was just like, my relationship with West Ham is absolutely, completely nothing to do with your work. It's more just sort of like the amount, the amount of self-loathing that I have with that fucking football club. So,
Yeah, they
yeah.
almost had me for a couple of years. They almost turned. I thought we finally made it, and then they reminded me exactly who they are and why I am the way I am.
You know
The
what?
last season or so. Yeah.
There's something to be respected about a club that just remains, or anyone really, that just remains relentlessly themselves. You know, they are they can win a European trophy and still just be a gang of absolute cunts, and you're just like, I thought that we were turning a corner here, and like even when we won. Everyone was like, "Why aren't you happier?" And I'm like, "You don't understand what West Ham is, do you?" Because I was like ecstatic, and then people were like, looking at me and being like, "Doesn't seem pleased that you've won your first European trophy in, what is it, 50 odd years?"
Yeah.
And I was like,
Was it?
yeah, I just feel like it's going to get taken away from us, or we're going to do something where we fielded an ineligible player or something like that. And it's just like, and what happened
Yeah.
was like way more mundane than that, which was we just went back to immediately being shit. And I was like, great, nice one.
Let's not buy any players. This is working fine. This
Yeah,
should be okay.
how
Yeah.
could that possibly go wrong? We really need a striker. I tell you what, we should sign instead. Everyone except a striker. Great, nice one.
They misunderstood Moneyball.
They
That's where it went
did.
wong.
They did.
Yeah, they really did. It's quite funny. Like, yeah, we kind of just, we're just waiting for the bottom to fall out of that. And I think that's probably, having been in therapy like you have, you've probably talked about patterns and struggling to break free of them. And because there's safety in the suffering. So why change? Why grow when I can just be perfectly happy knowing that I'm going to follow these patterns? And that's what West Ham are, basically. And that is probably why
That
we
is,
are the way we are.
I mean, fucking hell, yeah. I've managed to like consciously uncouple my emotions from the football club. People talk about having like their team ruin their weekend. There's only so long that you can do that for. I have Arsenal fans that go like, "Oh, when Arsenal lose, it ruins my weekend." It's like, try losing pretty much every game for 34 years. After a while, people are like, "Oh, who have you got on Sunday?" And I'm like, I don't actually know.
Want to know?
I kind of don't want to know. And then if we beat them, I'll just like mind wipe and just like kind of go back and watch the entire game somewhere that like I've recorded it on Sky Plus or whatever.
Yeah. I also like your reference to a fielding an illegible player. It's like PTSD from Manny on my in me there that's never quite left us. These things people don't forget, do they?
You
People
don't
don't
forget.
forget.
Try as you might. Fucking hell, that game, yeah.
Could have been our year. So so going back to that, sorry. So going back to your mum and your dad and your background and all this kind of
Yeah.
thing, what was pushing you into this idea of lying about your age to get an internship advice? You're swerving a path that you're being directed towards, and you're consciously.
That
So what's
that is
creativity
genuinely a
looking like at that
question.
point for you?
You know what? I don't really know. I think I've always been a child. Like I had kind of two modes, which were out playing football or in watching telly. I didn't really read a book until I was like Roy Keane's autobiography was the first book I ever read. That was like, what's that, year 9 probably? So I was about 13, 14.
Good place to
I was
start,
like,
though.
it ain't bad. It's not bad. And it felt illicit because he was swearing because he's fucking horrible.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I would always read the paper, all that sort of stuff, but it never really felt like my mum and dad aren't particularly creative people. They're not like, it's not like, oh, my mum always painted and I grew up in a house full of books and, I'm sure there were copies of Danielle Steele or whatever, but it's like, we would just sit and watch films or sit and watch telly. I remember my dad just kind of like sequestering me on the sofa, being like, "This is The Sopranos." I'm like 12, and I'm like, well, I feel like this is going to be formative to my experiences for the next however many decades. But like genuinely, when I think about what was the impetus there for actually sort of like pushing me into those industries and having the, having the chutzpah to just kind of be like, fuck it, let's just like not go down the same path that all of my friends were doing. Um, I think it was probably just like an existential fear of staying in the suburbs and dying in the suburbs, and just like, I had mates, God bless them. I mean, I haven't spoken to them in 20 years, but God bless them anyway, where their whole goal was, I'm going to get a job, buy a house that's down the road from my mum and dad. And I love my mum and dad, and they live down a really lovely road. I would honestly hate to do that, because I'm just like, I wanted to just like go out into the world and find out who I was as a person. And I was never going to be able to do that in Hornchurch. You know what I mean? And it's a break my mum's heart to say it. You need to leave RM12. You know what I mean? You need to just like see the world and discover who you are. It wasn't like I fucking went far. I just went like 15 stops on the district line into town. I was very lucky that I could do that. I was lucky that I could do an internship because my mum and dad lived in a commutable distance, and my dad gave me a fiver for a sandwich. And it's like, great. You know what I mean? It was also an era, 2007-ish probably, when I was doing that internship, where you wouldn't get paid. And there's very few people that can afford to do that. I was lucky that I'm kind of like from the outskirts, or I was living in the outskirts of London. It's like, I was just like, well, it's almost like it would be improper for me to just look a gift horse in the mouth here and just like not do something with that. But where the actual creativity comes from, I don't know. I think that, like, my mum and dad are, actually, my dad less so. He's a man of few words on occasion. But, my mum and her dad and the people that we kind of like grew up around, they're all like talkers who like love just like chatting through stuff. Like, I still have conversations with my mum where I'm on the phone for an hour and I'm like, what did we talk about? And like, don't know, nothing. So I always sort of saw that as creativity. Always saw it as kind of like, saw almost like the real time coming up with ideas and stories, and someone telling you an anecdote, and it being much more of like makes it sound much more deep than it is, but almost like the kind of like the oral traditions of the East End being like the closest thing that I can have to a kind of creative inspiration point there. But I just kind of like, my circuitous way into working into football was like internship advice. Then I told them I had to have a day off so I could get my A levels, and they were like, "Wait, how old are you?" And I forgot that I told them that I was older than I was, and they were like, "You obviously can't work here," and I was like, "Fair enough."
I
And
meant
then
I meant Nana's funeral. I meant
yeah,
Nana's funeral. Sorry.
I always get that. Her name was A level, and and then from there I ended up working in like shopping telly. I was working at like I was like a junior cameraman and floor assistant for like a low rent shopping TV, because I knew I wanted to do something vaguely creative. And how I ended up getting into that was literally laying in bed being like, I'm never going to fucking work ever again. And my mum being like, print off a CV. Bearing in mind, I've done nothing apart from just like this, like 3 months I did advice. Um, Print off a CV, and I'm going to go door to door, posting them through people's letterbox, and one person, and just on our road, and just like, you never know, someone might work in telly or something like that. And genuinely, there was like some bloke down our road where it's like, my brother or cousin, I can't remember now. His name was Paul Tremaine. I remember that. So God bless you, Paul. Um, he was like, my brother or whoever it was works in shopping TV. Maybe that's an in for him. And genuinely, that was like the the tiny little crack of daylight that I just like whacked in, just cracked it all the way open, and was just like, I'm in now. You'll have to drag me out. And yeah, from there, it was just like a series of pretending you can do something until you can do it. Then when you can actually do it, being like, what's the next thing? And I think that's kind of how I've always lived my life, all the way up till Mundial, really. And then, again, funny enough, having this conversation earlier, because I'm now at this sort of stage where I'm like, what do I do next with my life, my career? And I'm like, at some point, I lost the ability to kind of like do things that I couldn't do. And I think that all creative people kind of like maybe get into that. It's the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset, right? If I'm going to get full on diary of a CEO about it. And it's like, you can bleep that bit out, fuck that cunt. But I think, but I do genuinely believe that, because it's like, I kind of like was like, I know that I can do this style of story. I can tell, I know this much about football. I know this, I know that. And I would just focus on those. And now I'm at a point where, the industry that we work in is massively oversaturated, and it's massively oversaturated with, and I'm going to be completely frank, very mediocre work. And that's because I think a lot of people don't do it for, the love of the game. They're doing it for the very real reason of just keeping the lights on. And, so I'm like, all right, well, what's the next thing? Because I've kind of done all that. It's the reason why I left Mundial, because I was like, well, I've achieved all of that I want to achieve here. Not like I'm like, who's that Roman cunt who was just like looking out and just being like, he wept for there was no more worlds to conquer. It wasn't like that. I was just like, I've done magazines, I've directed like loads of commercials and stuff for Adidas and New Balance and Nike and shit like that. And it's like, I've written every fucking possible story about Diego Maradona that there is possible to ever write in a million years. And, really enjoyed doing it. And I wanted to do something else. And I think the last, 5 years of my life has been trying to work out what that is. And also try and come to terms with the fact that I might never know what that is, and also be okay with that. And, so when you kind of, a very lovely introduction of, the work that I've done, you know, through Mundial, post Mundial, I'm still constantly just trying to just be like, what's the better thing that I can do there? How can I make something that feels like more authentic to what my values are? And I'm now at a place, touch wood, unless I never get an email of work ever again, where I'm in a very privileged position that I can kind of pick and choose work a little bit. But also now what I try and focus on is like, does this feel like this aligns with my values? And I think that that's the kind of thing that becomes your USP, right? Because it's like, I think I'm a pretty good writer, and I'm a pretty good gobshite, as you probably have worked out now for the last 25 minutes. And I'm good at strategy and I've got all these things that I'm good at. But there are loads of people out there that are also good at those things. So it's like only using my perspective and staying true to the things that I actually believe in and holding on to them in a fucking death grip is good. That's the only USP that you can ever have in this industry, but in this world. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like trying to be something I'm not doesn't work. I remember actually, I had a job when I was about 18, 19. They literally came up to me and they were like, some of the people in the office can't understand your accent if you would like to go and do, what are they called? Like My Fair Lady, like they change your accent and you end up a posh one. What's that? Whatever that's called. What's that called? Come on. Come on. No, can't find it. It's gone. But do that. And I was like, oh, okay. And they were like, but you've got to pay for it. And I was like, I didn't see that as being like so fundamentally against all of the things I believed in at that point, because I just fully believed that like I don't belong here and I need to change to fit in. Then once I got to about 23, 24, started writing, I was like, no, my voice is the thing that is different, that makes me different, that makes me unique, rather than just being like any other cookie cutter cunt that's like in the world. Whereas like, well, there are a million of those people and there is only one me. And I know it's all getting a little bit, Hallmark card, but I just think that that's like the thing that I really try and impart on people. Because again, I get people reach out to me and be like, how do I get involved in writing about football, or how do I do this, or how do I do that? And there are no easy ins. I don't think there are ever really any easy ins, but there are even fewer of them now. And I think that the only way you can actually kind of forge anything like a path for yourself is by really trying to work out who you are, what you're about, and what you stand for, and then never deviating from that line and just being like, I don't care. I mean, occasionally, we've all got paid rent, but like more often than not, I don't care what this is. A thing that this is my line, and I'm going to stick to that line. And I think that we're all I'm constantly in a process, a learning process of trying to get better at doing that. And I think I'm getting somewhere close, but if I end up, if I die at wherever the fuck, with a body of work that feels vaguely coherent, I hope it's coherent to those values. Because Now, my girlfriend always says, you know, she's Scottish. She goes, "You only get one wee life," and it's like, yeah, I want to make sure that in that life I'm doing the work that I actually want to be doing, rather than just like some shit for dickheads.
Well rounded up, by the way. That was wrapped in a bow perfectly at the end. Thank you.
I know. I can't believe it. I landed the plane. Can you believe that I landed the
Yeah.
plane there? I was like, I don't know where this is going. I'm having to build the plane as I'm flying it, but yeah.
So on that note, like, and talking about your pathway and a body of work that feels, that it's yeah, it's got like a holistic look to it. Are you open to that pathway leading away from sports and the brands that are within it? Like, if we were to like reel off some of your, so looking at your portfolio now, Nike, Adidas, Arsenal, Chelsea, Umbro, AC Milan, Benfica, San Diego, we've got New Balance, Aston Villa, all the big
Yeah.
guns in there. Are you open to the possibility of your creative output and calling taking you away from that world and into something else entirely?
Totally.
If it's something that feels authentic, yeah.
Totally. But I think it's like, it's finding that authenticity, right? And it's finding where those parallels are. When I tell stories in football, they are like a certain thing. It's like, right, if I'm going to now tell stories in fashion or whatever it might be, whatever other market, different sports, also those different sports are all not a monoculture, right? They're all completely different with their own little nuances. Whatever they may be, it's trying to find and not compromise, trying to find parallels and then not compromise on those values and the things that like are like how I believe a story should be told, what I believe is important in doing branded work as well. Because it's not just about selling product, it's about like what that brand is really saying about the world, kind of like, fucking capitalist, realist, whatever. But I think that when it comes to working outside of sports, and I predominantly work in football, so I'll kind of use sports generally, but I'm talking about football. I think you have to look outside. You have to be open to seeing what the rest of the world is, because I think one of the things that I work as a consultant for like working on strategy for football clubs and, organizations like Kick It Out and brands that are trying to get into all sorts, like literally the spectrum of what football is about. Um, and everyone is constantly looking at examples of what other people in football are doing. And you end up just like a load of people that are copying each other's homework. And you end up with these like really weak facsimiles of the same ideas, the same shoots, the same references. I've seen mood boards that look literally copied and pasted from brand to brand to brand to brand to brand. And I'm like, there are other stuff out there. You know what I mean? It's like I take as much when I'm working with, again, working in football, but when I'm working with those, I take as much inspiration from the CrossFit Games as I do what Venezia are doing or what is happening on Book Talk as to, like what Ellis Platten is doing on YouTube. It's like all these things can be great, but they should all sort of like become a stew that becomes something unique. It's like, to go on a little bit of a tangent, I told you to, I warned you that be careful what you wish for. But it's like how when I grew up writing, like I felt like you should write. Like I was using big words. I was using words that just felt like it made me sound smart. I wanted people to go like, he is not dumb. I bet he went to university was like my like gold star thing. That'd be like the dream, right? And I'd occasionally just sort of like send something I wrote to like my mum and dad, and they'd just be like, they're not thick, but they'd just be like, I don't know what this word means, or like, I can't really read this, whatever. And I'm just like, you're a fucking early 20s tosser, so you're just like, oh, you just don't get it. What I'm doing is like on a higher plane than this. But when I actually understood that you should write how you speak, or much more how you speak in a kind of like, an articulated way, but also that you become this magpie for different influences and different references. And if you just copy one person's writing style, say, you're a plagiarist. But if you read and love 5 different people and then you take a bit of all of them and make that your writing style, you now have a unique style, right? So it's like like my writing influences are like, this is very bro coded, but it's like, the New Journalists, it's like Gay Talese and a bit of Tom Wolfe, Wright Thompson, all these sort of like kind of like big hitters in and around sort of like classic era of men's magazines, all that sort of shit. And I was like, let me put that into one unholy gumbo, but then also sort of like be like, how would I say it in a way where if I was saying it out loud in a pub, someone would call me a cunt and tell me to leave. That just became like my tone of voice. I feel like, when you're doing work with brands or whoever it might be for yourself, or you're trying to make a film, a documentary, or write an article or fucking Substack, you really have to kind of like, your head needs to be on a swivel. You need to have this, like, your periscope needs to be up, and you need to be looking at everything, because you just look in one space and you ossify, and you're just like, well, now I only sound like that one thing. And, the world moves on, trends change, things were, it's like, in writing, everyone went through like a personal essay boom, and then that finished. If you only wrote personal essays and you're like, this is the thing that I do, good luck to you. I hope you get a career out of that. But you need to be able to see what other stuff is happening in other areas of writing, in other areas of culture, and take those different influences. In my writing work, I'm as influenced by, stuff about psychology, and I'm watching Mr. Scorsese at the moment. So it's like stuff about cinema, and it's like, this amazing book by, Callum Jacobs or Zito, Maidu, or whoever else that I'm sort of like reading at the moment. And you have to be like a magpie, because I think it's like, to circle back finally to what your question was. Big circle you saw I did there. It's kind of concentric circles, bit of a spiral.
Really, really arc that run. Yeah, the wide arc.
Yeah, what I mean. You got to bend the run. You ain't gonna catch me offside, mate. But I'll get there eventually. It's like, yeah. I mean, I would love to work outside of sports. I am privileged enough to get consistent work working in this lane, but I also see sport as a very powerful tool for telling stories. Like, I've always loved football because you can basically tell any story within the prism of football. I could tell a fashion story, a history story, one about racism or any other kind of prejudice, or geography and class, and all these sort of things can be within that framework. So it's like, what I write about is, I've never written a fucking match report in my life. And that's a good thing, right? Because you've all seen the match. You kind of know, my opinion isn't more important than your opinion, or some bloke in the pub's opinion, or my dad's opinion. It's like, what is the perspective that I can add to this thing? That's the only thing that's important. And it's like, I interviewed, I don't always write about football. I occasionally write about cinema. I interviewed Asif Kapadia, the filmmaker, documentary maker. Did like Senna and Amy, and he's got the new Dalglish film out. So it makes it kind of about football, but fine. We'll go with it. And he was just like, he was like, there is no true documentary. People feel like they're watching a documentary, but they're not. It's like, you're watching my subjective opinion creating this piece of work. And it's like, that I think ultimately has to be what all of us strive towards, is like to create something that's unique, because like, we're never going to be able to tell 100% the truth, because my memory, we can see the same event and my memory is different from your memory. It doesn't make either one of them false. And I think it's like, if I kind of move into like where we were with Mundial, and if I had to kind of describe the ethos of it as I saw it anyway, which wasn't always the way that everyone else saw it, it was, you print the legend. I remember writing a piece about how when I was growing up, I remember seeing Francesco Totti for the first time in my life, and just being like, one, that's a beautiful man, and two, that's the like most exciting football player I've ever seen in my life. He must be the best player in the world. He was not the best player in the world. It's debatable whether or not he was even the best player in Italy at that time. So it's like, that doesn't make my opinion wrong, and that's much more interesting and unique than me being like, I'm going to go by the stats here. I'm going to go match report by match report. It's like, I believe in sort of like the emotional truth of stories. And I think that, to kind of like look outside of the purview of just football or just sports or whatever lane that you work in, because there might be anything, right? You need to be open to the experiences of life. You can see I've done therapy, right? You're open to the full spectrum of what life has to offer. Because I think that's the only way that you end up doing something half interesting. Because otherwise it's just it's the same old, same old.
Absolutely. Yeah. I thoroughly enjoyed that tangent. But just
Some tangent that. Sorry, mate.
First of all,
yeah.
There's a few things I want to unpick. Firstly, I want to go back to the handful of writers that you mentioned that were that you enjoyed and were an influence on you. Have you considered that now your name would be on someone's list as a writer that is an inspiration for them? Because you've followed you've you've collected your influences and you've found your style within that. And now your style is something that's very attractive to someone out there because of the authenticity that they're getting through it. You've become one of the people that you were looking up to yourself in some ways, I'm sure.
I mean, I'd love to be considered that, right? And I'm sure if I am that for anyone, that's fucking amazing. And if you could have told 23-year-old Sam that, Ryan fucking wrestling blogs at 7 o'clock in the morning because I've stayed up all night and those are the only things I was getting commit. Genuinely, how I got into writing, quick tangent again, was I was working a night shift for an online TV bingo channel, and I had nothing to do all night because literally my job was if the channel goes down, I had to restart the computer, and that was it. And I was like, I need to do something constructive with my time because this cannot be my life because I'm going fucking insane. The first thought was I'll bring my PlayStation and get really good at FIFA, which I did, tick. But the other thing was I was like, I've always wanted to write. I should write. And I reached out to this website called Sabotage Times that a friend of mine was writing for, Jake Hanrahan, who now does like Popular Front and stuff like that. Really great journalist. He's like a war journalist, right? So it's like completely different field to mine. But he was writing for this website where they kind of like, it was run by James Brown, who did Loaded, and they'd have like Irving Welsh write for it and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, fuck it, I'll throw my hat in the ring. And I was throwing my hat in every possible ring. I don't know how I afforded so many hats. And I was like, I will write about anything. And I was just like, literally just like looking around being like, I'll write about FIFA. I'll write about this. I'll write about that. And one of the things that was on in the middle of the night was wrestling. So I was like, I'll write about wrestling. And they're like, great, write about wrestling. And so like my first like 5 articles were all about wrestling. And I was like, from there, they were like, do you want to come in and just like sit in the office for a bit? And I was like, yeah, sound. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. Genuinely. But it's like, being open to experiences. And I've completely forgotten what your question was originally. That's it. Being maybe a reference point for other people who are writers now. I
Yeah,
mean, that's amazing. That's
aspiring
amazing.
even. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And I only hope that, that they take and improve on the work that I've done. I think that's all it can be. Like all of us do, and any creative that says they don't is a fucking liar. But we all have ego about our work, and I really am proud of a lot of the articles that I've wrote. And I remember introducing the long caption to Mundial, and I would do these kind of like, I kind of felt like I kind of perfected the 2,200 character story as like an extended caption on those pages. Some of them did really well. Some of them everyone just hated or just completely ignored. But I started seeing other people doing that in a similar style, whatever. And I think at the time I was a bit like, get off my fucking property. This is my space. Move out of the way.
yeah,
Now, as I've got older, like I said, that as my frontal lobe has come in, I'm like, that's amazing. That I did something that wasn't game changing. I'm sure other people were doing it, but like there are other football pages that were doing something similar because of how I was doing something. And that's like I take pride in that now that I have the critical distance from that. But when it comes to it took me a long time to find my voice, and I think that that's one of the things where it's like, by all means, rip me off, do a bad Sam Diss parody as much as you can, and then just find your own voice. And it's great because it's like, I wouldn't be like, like, stop ripping me off. But I'm like, take me and go forth, improve on me. I want to be able to read great writing. I think that's one of the things that we're really struggling for at the moment. I think that we're in like a dearth of great writing. And I think that part of that is because it's impossible to become a writer because there are no places to write for. One of the things that I was taught very early is that the first 7,500 things that you write will be unreadable dog shit. And you better hope that you write them for a place that not many people are reading. And I was lucky that was exactly the case. I'm 99% sure, please don't anyone to go looking for these things, but like, I'm pretty sure they don't even exist on the internet now. And I'm fucking glad of it. I'm glad that, hopefully they've been shot into the sun. But you need to get reps of doing stuff. You know what I mean? It's like, one of the things that I really struggle with is like, I want to be good at things immediately, but I need to remember that I'm pretty good at writing now, but it took me a long fucking time and a lot of really shit work before I started writing something that was mediocre. And the one that was after that was okay. And the one after that was pretty good. You know what I mean? It's like, it's an incremental process. And so again, spiraling back around to your original question of like how that feels, it feels I don't know. Weirdly, I feel kind of inspired that might be something that people find inspiring. You know, it's difficult for me to say in all humility that like people would like see my work and be like, that's the guy. Maybe that's true for some people, but I'm just, there's a mixture of pride and also it gives me inspiration to want to go and do the next thing, to go and improve on that, go and improve on that and improve on that. Because that's all it's about, right? It's just, life is an iterative process. And, you know, there's a reason why fucking WD-40 is called WD-40 is because it was the 40th try at it. And it's like, I think that's what life is about. It's like, you got to try things and fuck them up and then try something else.
Yeah, those reps that you mentioned bring you to something like the English disease, right? That's what you're talking about. You put in those reps, you get the bad work out of the way, and then you land in a place where you can create something that's recognized as a phenomenal piece of work, like the English disease. The follow up to the very popular English patient.
That's a good joke, and I've never fucking done that joke before.
Yeah,
I'll be nicking that
felt a
without
bit of a
credit.
dad, it felt like a bit of a
No,
dad joke. I'm just,
it's
I'm
good.
getting, I'm still finding my feet with those.
Maybe this is my age, but I really appreciate that. And like I said, I will be stealing that
Thanks,
credit.
Sam.
So yeah,
Thank you. I appreciate that. But so yeah, tell
I
me about that. Tell me about that. From conception to setting out to do something that is quite a, well, I say quite. It's an incredibly detailed and sensitive piece of work. It's like, it's a removal, I guess, from the lighter touch that maybe you had on Mundial. It's quite a heavy piece, right?
it is heavy. You know, violence is heavy. It's, you know,
Yeah.
racism is heavy, and class consciousness is heavy, and all these things are heavy. And you know, I don't feel like I had the skill set to be able to write that when I was 23 rather. And it took me 10 years to kind of feel like I even had the, you know, anything about me, enough texture, enough that experience, enough sort of like understanding, and again, critical distance from sort of like my memories and perspective and all that sort of shit. You know, how it kind of come about was, I feel like I was having this conversation with a few other friends who are like writers and various creatives, where I was just like, I feel like the internet has made us all kind of think smaller. Like, how can this be a vertical video, or how can this be a caption, or how can this be a blog post? And I was like, one of my goals is I want to think slightly bigger. Like, if it's an article, can it be a podcast? If it's a podcast, can it be a documentary? If it's a documentary, could I make it into a feature film or whatever? And just kind of like go, fuck it, let's swing a bit. And that was my swing, you know, and I didn't know if it would work. It is me being completely frank, come at a time when I wasn't getting much work in, and I had a bit of time to think. And I was like, part of that thought was, fuck, maybe I have to go get a proper job. And, you know, I was chatting to people who run pubs around here and be like, I might get some shifts, all that sort of stuff. There's complete transparency. And I went to Clapton Library, which is about, I don't know, 5 minutes that way, and sat there, and I was like, what I'm really bad at is I've got a phone that has a notes app that has a million dollar ideas in it, right? And I'll know that I'll never do anything with any of them. And I was like, this is an idea that is stuck in my head, to write about the legacy of hooliganism in some sort of way that felt it was unique, gave a different perspective, and wasn't sort of like the conventional received wisdom that we're constantly having pushed down our throats, or certainly had been for a long, long time. And so I just shot off what was an absolute fucking stream of consciousness email to Luke at Stack. He's like one of the hosts of Football Ramble. He's someone who very graciously and kindly reached out to me when I left Mundial and was like, look, you ever want to do something? Let me know. And it took me 4 years to take him up on that offer. He probably forgot he said anything about it. And I emailed him. I was like, here's a brain dump. What do you think? And I closed my laptop and I went home. And I was like, even if I get nothing out of that, even if it comes to nothing, I've made something go from my head into the real world. An email was enough at that point.
A
And
little
then
bit
an
of
email about
action, right? That just
it's,
changes something, doesn't it?
it's, you know, if you look into behavioral science, you need to move an inch to be able to do the rest of it. You know, you need to have that momentum to be able to push a boulder down the hill. And I was like, fuck it, nothing will ever come of that. Came home, watched Sopranos, went football training, did whatever I did with my life, made a salad. And the next day, just got an email being like, "This sounds great. Do you want to come in and chat about it?" And I was like, "Fuck, oh shit, fuck! I've got to make this thing now. I don't know if I want to do it." And the original pitch of it was much more about how it was this subculture of subcultures, much more about sort of like the cultural influence of it on style, on music, on the way that men saw themselves and saw each other, and all that sort of stuff. Very, very big. And as I kind of like started speaking to it, it started sort of like whittling away until it was like this kind of like relatively bumpy, lumpy idea that I still didn't really know what to do with. We're talking about July 2020. No, fucking hell, 2022. When did it come out last year? July 2023. I, started developing it, and they were like, "Cool, this will probably come out sometime next year." And I thought, sweet, I could put that to the back of my mind and never think about it ever again, and hope they forget about it, because this is enough for my ego to know that someone wanted to do something that I wanted to do, and I don't know that I have the creative and professional capacity or capability to really sort of pull this off. And then they kept me accountable, and they're like, "We want to make this thing. Is there something you can start on it?" And I was just like, again, fuck. Okay, cool. Like, you need people that push you, and you need people that challenge you. And that was, for me, very lucky. That was Luke. That was Nikki and Finn, my producers. And they were constantly like, "Right, we're all going to be in a WhatsApp group. Right, we're going to, ring you all the time until this thing starts happening." It took like 9 months before I fucking wrote a word of it. And the first script I wrote was not a script. Had no idea what I was doing. And there was lots of good stuff in there, but I wrote it like it was like a monologue or a stream of consciousness article because I was one of the editors, or the editor of Mundial. I was like, I could have published that as Sangue Mundial, and people would have liked it, and fine. Don't ask me any questions about it. I've kind of got it out of my system. But they challenged it, and they poked and they prodded, and they was like, "What do you mean by this? And what about that?" And it's like, I felt like this bit's a bit long, and we could kind of lose this, and this feels like too much of a tangent, and maybe this is the story, and maybe we could get rid of everything else. And through that process, that really shitty first draft, I wrote one that looked like a script. They sent me a bunch of their scripts of previous shows that they'd had and they'd enjoyed. And I was like, I'm going to make this into a script format. And it was also shit. And I was just like, fucking hell, I cannot do this. And I was reading through it and being like, there must be something here. What am I missing? And I realized the thing that I was missing was putting more of me in it. And it's like, that's probably a very self-centered, literally, way of thinking about these things. But I was like, that was the only way that I could get my head around such a big topic, was like, I am the audience surrogate. I am the person who is going to like try and tell a story that is too big, and I can be like the nucleus, or like, I'm not a fucking physicist. I don't know, whatever the nucleus does. I'm the center of gravity to kind of like bring all these sort of like atoms towards me. And and then we just did it. I think kind of like a bit like, you could probably tell from the way that I speak, I'm a bit ADHD with this sort of stuff, but it kind of like, it works in its way where it's like I start something and then hope that through a bit of talent and a bit of trust of the people around me and a bit of time, a lot of tease, something will come out of it. Threw myself into it, and I was like, we're getting closer. This is incrementally closer. Recorded the first episode. I'd never been in a recording studio before. I never had cans on for anything other than like doing like a podcast or whatever. It's like to actually just like speak something that I'd written. I was like, fuck, this is terrifying. And we made this, this 2-hour edit of a first episode that everyone uniformly agreed was boring as fuck. So shit and boring. I was like, oh no, this thing that I've made is dreadful. It's so shit that I'm not going to just like not make any more of these episodes, but like this is going to leak out and people are going to be like, who's this cunt? He can never be let anywhere near a
We've rumbled him.
keyboard.
We've rumbled him, yeah. He was an absolute chancer.
Finally, the desperate industry
Told ya.
chancer has been caught. We've collared him, and he's going to throw him in Nick. And I was like, what do I do here? And, I had a couple of long nights of the soul, and, you work with people that you trust. And the people that I trusted, Nikki and Finn, they were both just like, there's something here. Don't panic. Cut it away to like the bare bones of it. And just kind of presented it as that. And it just worked. It was just like, like, you know, you get these things where the stars kind of align in it, and it's just like, for whatever reason, it kind of worked, right? And once I'd done one, picked up a bit of confidence to do the next one. The next one was the first draft of episode 2 was still quite shit, but less shit than the first draft of episode 1. And by I got time to do the third episode, I was like, this is pretty good. They were like, yeah, it's not that good. It's getting there. And then you just kind of like, you know, I picked up momentum and I started going and I started going and I started going. And I think that that's when I talk about, you know, this is a Diary of a CEO, Klaxing Dong, with like, you know, this kind of growth mindset of being like, I'm doing something that I'm bad at and I'm learning. My brain is becoming elastic and it's like the synapses are fusing or whatever the fucking brain does, some mad shit. And I'm like, this is getting better. This is getting better. This is getting better. I don't sound like a fucking idiot. And people seem to be responding to it. You also got to remember that the first 3 episodes came out, I wasted so much time because I was like, if I just don't do anything, maybe it'll just kind of work itself out without me. To the point where we put the first couple of episodes out and I was still writing the show, like literally, like I'd write it and record it in the week and then record it on the Friday and it'd come out on the Monday. And that's not how you do a show like that. And I'm sure terrified all of the producers, but I kind of needed that energy and that deadline looming and, you know, the fucking sword of Damocles hanging above me being like, I needed something to kind of get me going. And through that process, I learned so much about me, about what I wanted to do, about how I saw football, how I saw the world, the things that were important to me. I was able to, you know, really stay true to a lot of the values and themes that I feel had always kind of been in my work, but really kind of like sharpen them to a fine point now about class and about community and about the importance of people and about being kind to people and ruthless to systems, and also just being like unapologetic about who you are and what you stand for. And if this is my accent, let that be my accent. You know, I mean that on a bigger level. Like, I don't need to pretend to be John Ronson or, you know, whatever that fucking geezer who does This American Life, Ira Glass. Don't need to be those guys to do it. I was like, let me try and do my thing that feels like me. And, you know, it came out and I don't know. I don't want to say it was an anticlimax, but it's like I got this thing that was like almost like a rumbling existential crisis in my head out and into the world. And people loved it. And, you know, I say that with humility, but also it's like, because there's genuine surprise in my voice, because there was surprise coursing through my body. I was like, I can't believe that people actually really love this. You know, and it didn't fucking set the world on fire. You know, it wasn't serial, but it became a calling card for me. And like I said, it became something where it's like, that is now foundational to the work that I want to do for the rest of my life. And, you know, we probably only get those, I mean, I'd call it a little lightning bolt because, like I said, it didn't set anything ablaze. But, you know, you probably only get those moments a couple of times in your life. And that was something where I feel very blessed to have been in the right place at the right time, to be the right person for the right story, and also to have had the right people around me. Because I come up with the idea, wrote it all, did most of the interviews, and it's my voice you hear throughout. But that is a collaborative process. And I think that is very, very clear to me now that that's the environment that I thrive in. Some people want to be, you know, the reclusive writer and they go and disappear. Like my friend Callum, who's working on his second book, he disappeared on holiday to a far-flung place for a couple of months to kind of work on his book proposal and do that. And he needed that headspace. I don't need headspace. Maybe I'm just like a codependent person, but I want people around me to bounce ideas off of. That's how I work. That's where all my best ideas came from at Mundial. All of the best work we did was because it was like, we made the creative process feel like we were just bullshitting in a pub and we just went and did it. And I think that by divorcing myself from that process and trying to professionalize it, I think I kind of lost a little bit of the zhuzh, a little bit of the magic, a little bit. Certainly how it felt for me. And so, yeah, it just kind of unlocked something in me. And I'm thinking, what can I do that's bigger? What can I do that's better than that? What can I do that's different to that? What can I do that's unexpected? Because I think that, you know, you said it was different from the work that I'd done previously, and I agree, and that was by design. You know, I didn't want to do something that felt like it was going to be expected. And then it's just like, you know, bit difficult second album, but it's like, wow, how do I do that again? Enjoying that process and enjoying the fact that there is like a looming abyss that I'm about to throw myself off into. And I'm currently in that process now where I'm like, anyone who follows me on Instagram might have seen, but I was like, I'm currently looking for a coach to work with on these things. And it's like, I've had therapists, I've never had a life coach or a professional coach or performance coach or whatever that is. I've had them in football. They've only taken me so far. But it's like, how do you work with someone and have the humility to work with someone to get forward? Because, no man is an island and no cunt does this on their own. And it's like, how do we push people together to be better? And I think for a long time, I was stuck in a mindset of, if anyone else did well, this is me being completely honest now. If anyone else did well apart from me, I would be jealous and probably a bit annoyed. If someone got a book deal or someone wrote an article that went viral or everyone was like raving about this one thing, I was like, fuck them. Why is that not me? And it would piss me off. It would piss me off. But instead of using that energy to be like inspirational, it would become destructive to me. And, I spent a lot of money on therapy, and but also it's like, I'm very lucky to have friends around me who challenge me, but also who have like made me appreciate that we live in an ecosystem of lots of different people and success is not finite. If you do something really good, doesn't mean I can't also do something good. I think that we're constantly sort of like, we've got this maybe it's something, I don't know, lizard in our brain that goes all the way back to our earlier evolution, where it feels like we're sort of like constantly fighting over provisions and nuts and berries and shit. But it's like, there isn't a finite amount of success in the world. There isn't a finite amount of creativity or ideas. If someone has an idea, if someone goes and does an idea that I already had, I used to be like, fuck, I'm an idiot. Why have I not done that? This is stupid. You always do this shit. You'll never amount to nothing because of, I rest on my laurels. But now I'm like, ideas are 10 a penny. I just go, I'll come up with another idea. Good on them. That is, what did I think of their idea? And how can that spur on another idea? I think that building iterative process is something hopefully, I'm trying to talk myself into it, as you could probably hear, but like, that's definitely where I'm sort of finding myself at, now.
Well, it sounds like the therapy is working with your outlook on that kind of thing. Change. It's so relatable what you're saying there. A lot of that's really relatable. I think with NPLH especially, and the magazine iteration of it, it often brought out the worst in me. And felt a lot of jealousy towards other people. Fragile as anything when something may have been seen in NPLH and then it appears in something with a bigger platform, not necessarily lifted, but it might be like, oh, you've got more eyes on you and I'm doing this cool shit over here and that's really annoyed me. But, that's, again, where I was at that stage of life, I guess. It brought out a lot of insecurities and that kind of thing, and a little bit of work changes the perspective on that now. I think, it's really interesting that you experienced that, but have still managed to achieve a lot of things. And I'm curious if you're being pushed by the guys at Stack who were picking at your work, which I guess would have been a bit of a removal from Mundial, the creative process there, where you had a lot of clout, and it was probably quite a democratic process there, I imagine. From what I gather from Dan has said, maybe as well, it's like quite a lot of fun with the way those things worked. But you've got all of a sudden someone picking at your lines, at your structure, that kind of thing. You lose that, cut that, add that, and you're then like, oh, hang on a minute, there's someone that's there for your growth. But are you feeling that in the moment, or is that kind of making you flare up in any way?
Yeah, I mean, if my girlfriend was on the podcast right now, she'd probably call me quite a defensive person. I am, quite defensive. That's just who
You
I am.
are a man.
I'm a man. I'm also a centre half. So it's like, it's kind of hard coded into me. But I, funny talking about Mundial, I think that, we did so much great work and it was so collaborative most of the time. I think that one of the things that I found very difficult was that I don't know that we always challenged each other in the right way. Occasionally I would write, one person would write a piece And I think maybe because we were all mates, we maybe didn't go, I feel like this could be better if you did it like this. And we were all probably a bit too close to it. It's how I feel now. Obviously I know it's still going, but at that time I was like, I don't know. There's a good amount of professional jealousy that happens that can push you on, right? I don't know. There was it's where I was in my life, where they all were in their lives. I don't know that we fully meshed to the full of our potential. If I could have gone back and done it differently, I'd have done loads of things differently. I'd have had better boundaries when it came to the personal and the professional, which allowed me to sort of create better work and also probably better relationships with those guys. Because it's you're also running a business. And that's fucking not my skill set. And, I was a director of the company, despite being written out of history a little bit, which is just, fine. But, as a director, I won't get into that. But, I was also, anyone who knows, they know. But I was a director of the company, but my skill set is not putting a spreadsheet in front of me and seeing red numbers and knowing what to do with them. That was other people, and I dropped the ball on that. That's something where I was I should have held my hands up earlier and said, I don't know how to do these things, but what I can do are these things here. And instead, what I did was become defensive, and that defensiveness is often met with defensiveness, and it just turned into a little bit of tension. And you don't want to fight with your mates about stuff, but it's there's a reason why they say don't work with your mates. I worked with my mates, and it was 95-ish% brilliant. I loved it. Loved every single moment of it. The 5% of it nearly made me have a full-on breakdown, but what came out of it ultimately, I think, is positive, and I hope all of the other lads say the same. I think it was, as a thing, bit of lightning in a bottle, where it was it came at the right time. It had loads of great people working there. People were very receptive to the tone. Again, I'm not a man who counts his grievances, but between Desperate Industry Chancer and an unnamed, shall we say, editor at 442 who said that we wouldn't last a week. And I think he said we wouldn't last 2 issues. I believe is what he said. I remember your name, mate. But it's one of them was okay, let's see about that. I think he said that we had a gratingly over-familiar tone of voice. And I'm just don't be a cunt, mate. But anyway, I think that through that process of doing Mundial, I think I learned so much about me. Again, I'm really trying to be in my no losses, just lessons era, right? But it's I learned as much about, don't know why that's happening.
That's fantastic.
I wish I knew how to do that on cue. I think the process of doing Mundial, I learned much more about what I don't want to do than what I do want to do. And I think that it's hard to replicate success. And again, our success was, what's the word? Relative. None of us became millionaires out of it. None of us we topped out. I think when I was leaving, it was maybe 100-ish thousand on Instagram. Fine. That's success to some sort of degree, right? I kind of knew I didn't want to do that anymore. I knew I didn't want to try and capitalize on doing that as well. One of the things that, some of the older guys at the company would say was, I kind of want this to be my last job. I want this to be the thing that kind of is the defining piece of my career. And it will always be a defining piece of my career. It'll always be a cornerstone of the work that I do. And it was very formative to me as creatively, professionally, personally. But I wanted to do other things, and I feel very privileged I've been able to do other things and build on that good work and make fewer of those occasionally traumatic mistakes. And that's life, isn't it?
It is indeed. It is indeed. Yeah. No losses, just lessons. I like that. Moving on from that experience there, and then going back to this experience with the guys at Stack, and that more that this people that are pushing you, as you said, and stretching you a bit. Has that opened up your mind to the concept of collaboration and maybe a team being a conduit to your greatest self as a creative? But in order for you to reach your full potential, the only way to do that will be by having people around you that are gonna push the needle in, rather than it being, because creatives are some, especially writing, it's quite a solo pursuit, right? So it's easy to get in your own head and be like, this is my thing, this is me doing it. I'm gonna, these are my ideas, and this is what I want to do. But yeah, we're all better with when we've got people around us that want to see us win, right? And I'm not sure I'm phrasing the question clearly, but yeah, are you now, with your experience with the podcast, are you leaning into that way of thinking where you can go a lot further with people rather than on your own as a creative?
100%. 100%. There were times I've worked with people who saw creativity as being a dictatorship and not a democracy. And I just don't really agree with that. Because, it doesn't matter what field you're in, no person succeeds on their own. I was listening to, there's like a psychologist, I think she is, called Carol Dweck. She was talking about how she does this thing with her students at Stanford where, they talk about their heroes, Michael Jordan, Leo Messi, whoever. And everyone talks about these things and just sort of like they had like an innate talent. They just kind of like, they just had this drive that just like made them do this thing, and they became so like the best of the best of the best. And what happens after that, if they do a presentation, she gets them to go and research their actual journey. And you realize how many people helped them along the way. The luck that they had, the people that inspired them, the people that mentored them, the people that put an arm around them, the people that took a chance on them. And, I think in the work that we do, it's two heads are better than one, 100%. But also it's like, it's very hard because like we're all stuck looking at these little screens all of the time, or looking at our phones, or just stuck on our own and all that sort of shit. We're in a very isolating era. And you have these like facsimiles of connection, WhatsApp, even this to a certain degree, although this is much better than most kinds. Nothing really beats just sort of like sitting in a room and just sort of like, just like cracking it out and just like being like, wow, what are we doing here today? So how can you help me achieve what I want to achieve? How can I help you achieve what you want to achieve? And it being like this process of give and take. I became an editor before I became a writer. And I think I've never kind of really lost that impulse. The thing I love probably more than anything, is helping other people create stuff, is seeing a kernel of an idea and then helping that become something else. I mean, kernels just turn into popcorn. Right? So it's like, if the end point is popcorn, everyone loves popcorn, but sure, how can I make that into popcorn? I'm just like, I just love this process of working with people and helping them to see usually what is right in front of them, what they already have, and helping them get to appreciate that. A lot of the work that I do now, when I'm not a writer, or I'm not, making award-winning audio documentaries about the legacy of football hooliganism, is, I'm a strategist. And I work with brands and football clubs and all that sort of shit. And, I'm basically a brand therapist. I ask probing questions, get them to tell me the answers, and then, not different to what you're doing, I write down notes and I go, what do you mean by that? Like what is this thing? Like, this feels like the thing that you're circling at and you're not quite getting to. And I think that's what creativity is. I think it's circling around something and then having someone else just be like, right, stop, go in a little bit, and you get closer and closer and closer. And it's like, like in the Crystal Maze, where you've got like one person just doing everything. You've got all these people outside being like, up, 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 down, 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 down. It's like,
Yeah,
it's a process. You need the team around you, because it's like you have this vision that is so blinkered. It's called solipsism, where you can only sort of like see from your point of view. I think all creative people have that. That's kind of how we become creatives, because we have a unique view on the world that we want to share. But I think to get to our full potential and to become less fucking annoying to be around, frankly, you kind of need to take those blinkers off, and you kind of need to take outside perspective, and you need to invite feedback and learn that feedback is not the enemy and something you need to fight against, but it's something that offers you insight. And, that is data that you can draw from, rather. And it's like, you can disagree with it, but then you have something to push against. And you go like, no, this feels true and that feels fake. So now I have something to push against, and that makes that feel more true. there's no such thing as bad feedback, even if you completely fucking disagree with it. It's like this process of like letting people in rather than pushing people away. I think is so important. And I always kind of like, I work with agencies a little bit, and there's this, this thing in like ad land, right, where you'd have like a creative team. You'd have a creative and a designer that kind of work together. And I never really understood that. I never worked at agencies really and that sort of stuff. And I was like, why are they working together? They do two different things. But you realize it's because like you play off each other. It's important to do that. And when you're coming up with these ideas, you want to riff. That's why one of the most fun things to do is just like go be conspiratorial in a pub somewhere. It's like when I think back to the very best of times at Mundial, that's what that was. It felt like a gang who went to the pub conspiring to do this thing, where it's like all of the odds say that we shouldn't be able to do it. Let's have 4 pints and work out how we can do it. And I don't know, that's the thing that I really took away from that process. But that's the thing that I really took away from the process of making English Disease as well, is that you need people that are going to challenge you. You need people that are going to like sit there with you and call you on your bullshit, but also sometimes that people will just like listen to you and offer feedback, and you can read it in their face. They haven't even got to tell you sometimes. If I'm telling you a story and you're kind of like looking at your watch and, being like, oh, I might have to go, that's a shit story. I've got feedback now. I've got that data. You don't have that when you're sat on your own in a room. And, I've got an agent for books and stuff like that. But one of the things and she's great. And I think one of the things that really I love about that process is that like I can have ideas and bounce them off of her. But the thing that always really puts me off of writing a book is that you essentially just go and sit on your own and write 75,000 words. And at the end of it, then you talk to someone. I never understood why books aren't more collaborative. You look at every other artistic pursuit. There is a team of people that you're working with. Like I love the collaborative process, and it's become sacrosanct to everything I do now, whether that's just like telling my girlfriend Steffi about it, and I'll just like excitedly get up from a call and be like, right, here is my idea. And I'll just go, blah, 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 and she goes, okay, let's kind of like take a step back and just actually look at what you're saying here. Without that, I think that the idea of the solo creative pursuit, I think, is vastly overrated. But that's just me.
That feels like a really organic place to start winding this up. I think that whole passage there acts as really useful advice, without being remotely preachy to any range of creative. Not necessarily a writer, but anyone in any creative discipline can take a lot from that, and from your experiences. So I really appreciate your words there. And throughout the whole conversation, mate, feels like quite a special one for me. This is the 100th episode, and it feels like it's been a bit of a celebration because of your enthusiasm and your insight. And it's been a real privilege to kind of hear a lot about that journey. And definitely, as what happens with most of these conversations, if not all of them, there's something for me to take away. So no doubt, something for the listeners too as well. I really appreciate it, mate.
Absolutely, I'm genuinely, I'm made up that I get to be, 100 is pretty much the coolest number as well, isn't it? So it's like, I know that we've been trying to make this happen for, quite some time. So to finally be able to do it, but also it's like I've got so much out of this process as well, because I think that, if you enter into these conversations with, a little bit of vulnerability, the transparency, rather than sort of like bravado and self-mythologizing, and you need self-awareness to actually be able to get anything out of these things. So even just in this process of me gobshiting and you being like, reframing a little bit and just being like, so what do you mean by that? Or like, what does this mean? That sort of stuff. Things are becoming clearer in my head. And I think that that's a process that I've, very much enjoyed as well. So if anyone else can get anything out of it, good luck to them.
Mate, I won't send you an invoice either. We'll call it quits, yeah?
Yeah, perfect, mate.